we want to construct a table and a graph of y equals square root of x based on our basic table for y equals x squared. Now our table for y equals x squared is familiar. X values, the standard x values, -2, -1, -1 half, 0, 1 half, 1, and 2, give us respective y values 4, 1, 1/4, 0, 1/4, 1, and 4. We're very familiar with this. Now, in order to construct the table for y equals a table for y equals square root of x, what we do is we create a table inverse to the y equals x squared table. And to do that, we simply reverse the values in the columns. So, our table inversed table, not sure inversed is really a valid verb, but we'll see. Okay, so we're going to have our x and our y columns, but they're going to be switched, so that what's the y column here becomes the x column. So now we've got what? 4, 1, 1/4, 0, 1/4, 1, 4. And our y values will be, well, from our x column of the original table. That's just going to be -2, -1, excuse me, -1 half, 0, 1 half, 1, 2. -1 half doesn't look so hot, but that's what it is. Okay? Now, if I was to graph this, and I didn't have my R in inversed here, let's just slip an R in there. I'm not sure it's a good word anyway. Okay, so if we wanted to graph these points, that would be easy enough to do. The y values would go from -2 down here to 2 up here. We'd have 1, we'd have -1, we'd have 1 half, we'd have -1 half. And the x values, of course, would go from 0 to 4. So x would go out as far as 4. Well, if we cut that in half, and I'm never very good at doing this at the angle of the board, but and then we cut this interval in half and the interval between 2 and 4 in half. We get 1, 2, 3, and 4. And of course, we're going to need 1/4, so we cut the interval from 0 to 1 in half. That gives us 1 half. I'm not going to label that. Get too cluttered up. And then I cut that in half and I get 1/4. And that should all be quite obvious to you. If it isn't, make sure you give it plenty of thought. Okay, then we easily graph our points. When x is 4, y would be -2. So we'd come out here to 4 and -2. And then when x is 1, y would be -1. We'd get a point here. And when x is 1/4, y would be -1 half. And when x is 0, y is 0. Then when x is 1/4, y is 1 half. Now that should draw our attention. We just said when x is 1/4, y is -1 half. Now we're saying when x is 1/4, y is 1 half. And if we're going to get a function, that can't be. Okay, we'll deal with that in a minute. Let's finish sketching our graph. Okay, the point, okay, when x is 1, y is 1. When x is 4, y is 2. And of course, we've got two answers to the question. What is y when x is 4? We have -2 and we have 2. Still, let's go ahead and sketch a curve. Okay, so this is the set of points inverse to the points of the y equals x squared graph. Now, of course, the y equals x squared graph, which I'll sketch up here kind of quickly without labeling the points. But we are very familiar with this graph, so we know what these points are. And of course, we've got them listed here. If we graph these points, the graph is going to look something like this. When we reversed the x and the y, we reversed the roles of the x and the y axes, and that ended up with the graph being flipped over and rotated 90 degrees. Okay, so we ended up with this graph. Now, the problem with this graph is that this is not a function. And y equals square root of x, if we want the square root function, this is a function. So that what we've got here doesn't completely give us the function. Well, we'll continue in a minute, and we'll see how we resolve this.